Hello and welcome to TNA Top 10 College Football Week 14 show, December 2nd, 2024. I'm T Weave. With me as always is Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
Terry, you did not change your background. That's fine. I'll give you a
You are
second to do
correct.
that. It is championship week, my friend, after rivalry week. I'm gonna go ahead and get this out up front. I am extremely disappointed in the conduct and behavior of a lot of college football players and a lot of college teams. I get it's rivalry week and you're supposed to be amped up, juiced up, whatever it is. But don't act like a bunch of dumbasses. Planting flags, throwing punches, extracurriculars, shoves out of bounds, all of that extra nonsense.
Yeah.
Absolutely unnecessary.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I mean, the Iron Bowl didn't get too bad. I mean, it was a little chippy like you kind of expect it to be sometimes. But, I look at particular players and I think I kind of didn't expect that from him. I wish he would have done better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'll say it right at the top since, we're going to cover Nebraska here shortly. I just realized the case for my watch is gone. That's weird. But anyway, it's okay. It's all good. It might be on the ground. I've got another one in my drawer, so we're good. I don't keep car batteries around for my fobs right there, Terry, but I always have, the watch covers and stuff because, these things are expensive. But anyway, so Nebraska refused to shake hands with Iowa at the beginning of the football game.
Right.
Now, what people did not hear or see is a couple things. Higgins, their linebacker, who's such a great player, he had 4 tackles on Friday night, stated that Matt Rule interrupted their warm-ups. Matt Rule walked around the field as he does every game and walked around their warm-up, and they weren't really warming up. They were standing around with their thumbs up their asses, but that's, the story Iowa football wants to tell. Good for them. They didn't allow them to do the prayer with the team at the 50-yard line where they pray with the other team as well. They had the state police of Iowa blocking the symbol on the 50-yard line. And then so they come out to shake hands and they don't shake hands. This is my problem with that, other than I grew up on the Osborne era and he is probably the most classy individual that runs 70 points up on your ass and smile doing it, because he's just running his offense. You look the man in the face and you tell him we're going to kick your ass, and then you shake his hand and you go do it. And the whole thing, well, we were in Nebraska's heads, blah blah blah. No, Iowa, we're going to get to it. You made 4 plays and won a football game. Congratulations. You have beat the worst Nebraska team since 1962 in a 10-year run. Congratulations. But again, as we're going to talk about, shit's about to hit the fan. So very disappointed in this quote rivalry week because we think now that we're big bad paid players. Ohio State had over 100 people maced at that game, Ohio State, Michigan, over that stupid fight and the flag and all that crap. We got people here in North Carolina and playing Wolfpack versus UNC trying to plant a flag. The Sun Devil trying to put his Triton in the ground. Obviously, the Auburn, Alabama, there was a fist fight out on the sidelines. If you're playing playoff or bowl game football, the NCAA can still suspend all those players involved. They can go review all that and suspend you. You could be costing your team something. Now, in the case of Auburn, no offense, Terry, unless they go in on a 5-7, that doesn't cost them anything.
Yeah.
But what if Alabama was the 12th team in and you got 5 guys that threw punches and the NCAA says, well, they're not going to play in the bowl game. They're not going to play in that first playoff game.
That's huge.
It's huge. And I use Alabama as an example, but what about the Ohio State guys? Throwing fights, throwing punches and all this at Michigan, the Arizona State deal with it's all of them with playoff implications. And this is my thing. And I don't know that people understand the way I watch football. I know you do because you've seen it. I am like Nick Saban as a football fan. Great play, clap, clap. Let's move on to the next play. You could see, and we're going to talk about it when you get to the Auburn game, the discipline of Alabama is gone. Gone.
Yeah.
All the showboating, all the shit talking, all of the antics, and it's all over college football, and it's a problem as far as I'm concerned. It is a problem because at some point you become a distraction and an issue. You're no longer just making a play. And that's me off my soapbox for today, Terry.
But there were some good opinions stated by some coaches, similar to what you said a minute ago. We'll get to that when we get to those games, because there was one that I wanted to talk about in particular, but I won't give that away till we get there. But why don't we go ahead and dive in and let's go to the SEC. And like you said, this game had nothing to do with the conference championship game, but we like this game. Auburn at Alabama for the Iron Bowl. Alabama wins by 2 touchdowns, 28-14, and it wasn't that close.
Well, and let's face it, Alabama 4 turnovers.
Yeah.
Auburn's defense, if Auburn hadn't forced those turnovers, this would be a runaway.
Well, and Auburn's problem is they've had so many opportunities and they got 0 red zone offense, including field goals. I mean, terrible field goal kicking and terrible red zone offense. The only touchdown they got was like a 40-yard bomb. So,
Yep. And you guys didn't run the ball well against Alabama's defense, whereas they ran the ball very well.
Right. Well, and also we threw an interception with our 1,000-yard running back. He threw the ball right after one of those fumbles, first play. Our running back throws it deep down the middle for an interception.
Yeah.
But hey,
like I say, the Iron Bowl, we love the Iron Bowl. Good job, I guess, Coach DeBoer. You won the Iron Bowl. You did it with probably the most undisciplined Alabama football team I've seen in 17 years.
He did it because he had Jalen Milroe at quarterback.
Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams at wide receiver, couple of running backs.
Williams had some drops, though. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I think Milroe really just takes control at some points. Look at third down, 12 of 18.
12 of 18, yeah. When you get to third down 18 times, you're doing something. You're controlling the clock, as you can see. Clock's out of balance. But you can see the penalties, too, 6 for 66, 6 for 46. So, I mean, it got a little physical. And they started throwing punts. That's where I was saying I don't think this is a very well-disciplined Alabama football team.
Right.
I think,
well,
and
there
that
were
might...
some statements. I mean, there were some statements in the media during the week kind of led to this. They were kind of ticked off and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it might be DeBoer's MO that he's going to let him play a little looser, not be so Nick Saban, and that's fine because every coach has to have their identity. But don't make costly mistakes. That's all I'm saying. But 4 turnovers for Alabama would not happen in the Nick Saban era. Wouldn't happen. Playing undisciplined football.
That's right. But like I said, this game had nothing to do with the SEC title game. But it was obviously an Auburn game, and we talk about those every week, and this is the biggest one of the season. But why don't we talk about the SEC going into this weekend?
Hold on. One other thing, as I love to tell you. Today is the anniversary of when I was at the last SEC championship game, traditional East versus West, with Allison Faye. Somebody refused to go with us, Terry.
I was there. I dropped you off.
Yeah. The other thing was you guys could have ended Alabama's season. They still have a chance, which we're going to get to. I only want to get all of our listeners fired up that Alabama with 3 losses might still make it to the playoff, and now you're about to tell them how. Or
and we'll talk about
some of
there's a lot of slides before that, and hopefully my internet doesn't drop out. But I will say, if it drops out, it's been dropping out for like 2 minutes and coming back lately. I got to figure it out, but that's what's been going on. But here we go. So we got Georgia is in going into the weekend. They've got
locked.
They've got their Georgia Tech game. Has nothing to do with the SEC. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then the game of the weekend in the SEC, the only one that truly mattered as far as the title game goes, is Texas at Texas A&M. Whoever won that plays Georgia in the SEC championship. So let's see what Georgia did this weekend. 8 freaking overtimes against Georgia Tech, and they were lucky to get away with a win here.
Yeah, 8 overtimes. Look, the one thing that you can see statistically is Georgia is still a good football team. 563 yards, 260, still had a turnover. Look at the possession by Georgia Tech, though, Terry. Look at the possession by Georgia Tech, the control. So Georgia, with about a third of the amount of possession time, not quite. That would be 33, call it 37%. somehow manages to fight their way back into this game because they were down. Weren't they down 2 scores? 3 scores.
They were
17 to
down by quite a
6,
bit.
27 to 6. Yeah, they were down 27 to 6 at one point.
3 scores at one point, yeah.
Yeah, 3 scores. I watched a lot of this game. Georgia, I'm okay with the overtimes. I know that there was talk in our group chat about it and
Yeah,
whatever. I'm okay with the overtimes. But little on the penalties, but they didn't have the ball. Georgia Tech, meanwhile, did what they do.
right.
They ran, they passed, very balanced attack. This is a very good team. Georgia Tech, if they can keep a lot of those players and playmakers and that sort of thing, paring it down, to the 105 players on the roster, do not overlook the importance of that for anybody listening to this show. Yeah, Georgia Tech, great fight. Here's my issue with this. This game does not belong at the end of the season. Does not belong at the end of the season.
Because you think it should be a conference game the last week,
Correct.
so that
I think,
impacts a few
yeah,
of these.
look at Clemson and South Carolina.
Right.
Yeah,
Clemson backs into the title game.
Yeah, so with a little help from our friends in Syracuse, go
Right.
Orange. But yeah, Georgia Tech did a great job. Again, it's another close game. They probably should have won this football game, honestly. They outplayed Georgia. But Georgia made the plays when they needed to make the plays, and they got a couple beneficial calls from the officials. Let's not lie about it. I mean, there's no reason to. So, but you had 4 quarters and 8 overtimes to win the football game. You didn't win it. I don't know what else could be said.
All right, so that's what Georgia did. They had it clinched coming in. They're headed to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. But let's talk about who they're going to play. Texas at Texas A&M, and they escaped with a 17-7 victory, 17-0 at halftime, and A&M threw in a touchdown. So it's one of those. It was 10 points, but really didn't feel close at any point.
Yeah, to me, I felt like A&M was always right there. Like they were 1 or 2 plays away from winning this football game because it was that tight. But when you look at it statistically, I mean, Texas's defense held them to less than 250 yards, but both committed turnovers, and they mattered when they did commit those turnovers because both were driving on both turnovers. And then you look at what Texas did to A&M's rushing attack. You start making a team one-dimensional, having to throw the ball, and then you just go back into passing mode. I'm going to pin the ears back, and we're going to go. So, but anyway, I think Texas has and we're going to talk about it in the preview. I think Texas has a valid stance for the SEC championship game. I think that it's going to be a fun game in Atlanta. Georgia, Texas.
And really the 2 best teams all season. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been teams up at the top. A&M was up there. Tennessee's floated around. Alabama's had chances. But these, overall, there's been some ups and downs, but these have been the 2 best teams in the SEC, and it proved out, and that's who we're going to see.
Agreed. And we're previewing them later, correct?
We are.
Okay, then we'll move on.
And it'll be a rematch. I just thought I'd throw it in here as a finalization.
Yep.
But let's move on to the ACC. Kind of a similar thing here. SMU is in the title game going into the weekend. They got 1 game left that's not going to impact them. Miami controls their own destiny. If they win, they're in. If they lose, Clemson is in. And let's see what happens in that Miami game. Miami let Syracuse beat them 42-38, 380 passing yards from Kyle McCord. And Miami's going packing, and they got some things to answer, and Clemson slid in.
And Miami is hoping that somebody screws up along the way somewhere. They're going to need a lot of help to get into the playoff because that last 3 or 4 out is very compelling, Terry, and we'll get to it when we look at the top 10. But Miami should be a 3-loss football team. I've said that since they should have lost to VT. They should have lost to Cal. They're sloppy. They don't play disciplined football, but they have a rock star at quarterback, as you can see in Cam Ward.
Right.
But Syracuse was up to the challenge, and they did not back down. And the Orange pulled away with it, and they won. And I mean, Miami, the thing is about Miami, we've talked about them as the USC of 2004. It's like they play down. Well, this time it bit them. Stanford beat USC one time.
Yeah.
I think UCLA beat USC one time because they would play down to their competition, and they had no business in those games. Now, Syracuse isn't a bad football team, but I don't think they're a top 10 football team. And they just took down the U, who was all full of piss and vinegar and swagger. And it was a very well managed football game. Hardly any defense, which is going to be a problem for the ACC in the tournament, in the 12-team playoff. But it doesn't hurt my feelings that Miami lost because I really believe they got one over on Virginia Tech early in the season.
That's right. I mean, Miami, I think you could kind of see it happening. You go to the same plan where you let teams ahead of you and you storm back because you got a great quarterback. It's eventually going to catch up with you.
Yep.
And it's shown that it's caught up in the last few weeks. They're probably going to be outside looking in unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, and it's going to have to be crazy, crazy because Clemson loses to South Carolina
Mm-hmm.
and is already in the ACC tournament with the Miami loss in the ACC championship. Because again, they're done. So it doesn't matter. And Clemson's 2 or 3 losses are to Georgia and of course to South Carolina at this point. So
this weekend we got SMU and Clemson in the ACC championship. SMU, obviously the favorite here. Clemson win here. That throws another team in the mix for who's out and who's in. Because
correct.
I think some people would think SMU would stay. Some people would like them to be booted out. But I want to see chaos. So let's let all the underdogs win.
Well, and just as a reminder, Terry, SMU handled business this weekend too and looked very good. Very
They
good.
did.
So,
but I just mentioned chaos. Let's talk chaos. Big 12. Okay, so we've heard all week about all the different scenarios in the Big 12, but it really came down to this: Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado. If 3 of those 4 teams didn't lose, those other 5 teams really had no chance. They were out. So it came down to these 4 teams. That's what we focused on. Let's talk about those games. The first of those games was
oh my
Colorado,
God.
52-0 against Oklahoma State. And I have to be honest, I knew that Oklahoma State had underachieved this year. I did not know that they didn't even have a single conference win.
This got to be the worst season that Mike Gundy's ever had.
I mean, and against Colorado, they get 147 total yards in this game.
We make fun of Colorado's defense on this show.
4
Well,
turnovers.
where the hell was Ollie Gordon? Where the hell was the offense of Mike Gundy? What is Mike Gundy known for, Terry? Offense. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a smart ass question, but he is a guy that, if you remember, when his teams were tied with the Oklahoma and Texas that year, or Texas Tech, whatever it was the 3 teams. They were all tied for 1. He's there drawing plays on the sideline, trying to come up with a way for Justin Blackman to get the ball. Right. And the older Wheaton, I think his name was Brandon Wheaton, the quarterback that was like 27 years old or whatever. Old for that time period, not so much anymore thanks to COVID and the 6 years and all that stuff. But I never thought, even in Buffalo, even in Boulder, I never thought you would see a result like this. And Travis Hunter tried to put his stamp of approval on the Heisman, but I think it should go somewhere else. Particularly when you look at that person's numbers, Gentry's numbers, against the 3 last running backs to win the Heisman, which would include Reggie Bush, Mark Ingram, and Derrick Henry. So, anyway, completely surprised that Oklahoma State had no fight. They had all those returners we talked about. You pick them. to
I
be
did.
the Big 12 champion, as
And they
I
got
picked Utah.
0 conference wins.
0 conference wins, and I mean, and
I didn't
we
know he
know,
was gonna cut his mullet off, though.
yeah,
Coach
he's done
Sampson cut off
something.
his hair. I mean,
It was ugly. It was ugly. And Colorado, after this game, had a chance to be in the Big 12 title. So what happened after that, Terry?
all right, that's the first game. Second game, Arizona State handled business against Arizona 49-7.
Country ass whooping.
This put them in the title game, I believe.
Yes, it
It
does.
was 35 to nothing at halftime.
Yeah, they won, and by winning, they're in.
And they took their little spear thing and tried to put it in the turf at midfield, and of course it bounced back because that only works on grass. And then there was a tug of war with an Arizona player.
And the head coach has given his 20 coaches bonuses of $5,000 to $10,000 of his bonus money, and that's how you retain people. And look at the turnaround at Arizona State in year 2, Terry. This is an
That's right.
11 or 10-2 football team
And this is
going
one
into
of
the Big 12 championship. We picked them to finish toward the bottom of the Big 12.
yeah, and somebody pointed out on Twitter the other day, this is one of 2 former Gus Malzahn Auburn offensive coordinators as head coaches that are in title games in other conferences this year.
Mm-hmm.
So Hugh Freeze needs to get it together, or there's plenty of guys around the country that
Yeah,
might
because
want to show up.
you've got Rhett Lashley and you've got this guy. So
Yep. All right, so that's the second
but
game.
let's just say this though too, just real quick. Neither one of us thought Arizona was going to get stomped like this.
No, not at all. I mean, last year Arizona was that team that really got good toward the end of the season.
Yeah,
Apparently, that's not the way this season.
not the case. No.
All right, so we'll go through one more game, and then we're going to revisit the scenarios. This was a pretty good game. Kansas
This was a
State
good.
at Iowa State. Iowa State, like I said, we were looking at those 4 teams. Iowa State handled business, won 29-21. Held on to the ball, didn't do anything too flashy, but got 2 turnovers from Kansas State and ended up winning this ball game by 8 points.
One of the least penalized teams in the country, one of the best turnover margins in the country. It may be a little boring. It may, like you said, Terry, not be so flashy,
Right.
especially against a K-State defense and their offensive power they have at Kansas State, but it won the ball game. Won the ball game.
All right. So now we've got 3 of the 4 games. Let's relook at the scenarios. And apparently I didn't put the logo for the Big 12 on this one, but whatever. So Arizona State's in based on their win. Iowa State and Colorado won. And it comes down to the BYU game. BYU is not in it.
They can't get in it either. That's the
Right. Because the other 2 teams won. Everybody else won, so BYU's out. But if BYU wins the game, Iowa State is in. If BYU loses the game, Colorado's in. And let's see what happened. Another pretty decent game. And BYU wins this one 30-18. Pretty good season for BYU. But yeah, 7 turnovers, 3 fumbles by BYU.
Yeah, sloppy. But Houston was not really up to the task in terms of talent-wise with them. And there was a talent gap, and it was very, very clear. But very good season for BYU. But because they won and Iowa State won, we now have a Big 12 championship, Terry.
And that is Arizona State and Iowa State. So after all of those scenarios we talked about, we could possibly have an 8-way tie for the top. It wasn't that complicated. The 4 teams at the top all won, and that put Arizona State and Iowa State in this. And I'm looking forward to this. This should be a pretty good game. Iowa State's been good the whole season. Arizona State's been really dominating lately, the hot team. It'll be good to see them go head-to-head.
And just as a note, because when we talk about this, it'll matter to anybody who wants to listen to this very closely. Arizona State is currently ranked 16. Iowa State is currently ranked 18. The worst the winner of the title game can be is 12, which means they will be jumping 4 to 6 football teams, Terry.
Right. As far as seeding goes, yeah.
Correct.
Well, but then that's also another thing. So we talked about it a little bit last week. Is like the winner of this may not be above Boise State.
May not be. But I think if it's Arizona State, they will be. And I will talk about that when we go into
Yeah,
the seat.
they're
We
close
go in.
enough, and
Yeah.
we'll see that.
Yeah. And it's not just that, it's the way they're winning football games. But we'll
Right.
get into that. Let's move on to, is it the Big Ten?
It is, and you know where we're going before we get into the games that matter.
Well, this game mattered to
Nebraska
me.
at Iowa.
Yeah.
13-10 Iowa wins. You made a lot of statements about this earlier about the back and forth before the game, and that sort of thing. So let me step back and let me know about this one.
This is garbage. Iowa made 4 plays. Nebraska dominated this football game. With the 3-3-5 defense, they stopped a rushing attack that had 200 yards 8 times this year and 100 yards rusher 8 times this year, 49 yards. A muffed punt resulted in Iowa getting the ball at the 5-yard line. They got 3 points out of it.
But wasn't that I was watching during this? So didn't the guy that was supposed to field it not even touch it? And then another guy thought he touched it, so he went after it and he touched it, and that was what
Yes,
happened.
and if you ask the Nebraska fans, Iowa touched it first.
Okay,
But it is what it is.
right.
Muff punt, but Nebraska's defense bows up inside the 5, Terry.
Hmm.
An Iowa rushing attack couldn't score a touchdown against Nebraska's defense. That's a statement and a half.
Well, 5 first downs, 0 for 10 on third down.
Also a statement and a half.
That's right.
Then Nebraska misses the field goal. Shocker. Bad snap. That coordinator's getting fired too. Ed Foley will not make it to next season, I don't believe. And we're going to talk about the shakeup in a second. But Tony White's defense, 40 minutes of ball control, strip sack. Well, first the running back catches the ball. He gets 74 of those 115 yards on one play because for one play Nebraska forgot how to tackle, and for one play the referees forgot what a block in the back and holding looks like. So they didn't call it. 7-10. Then it's 10-10, and then it's 13-10 on the last second of the game for the 6th year in a row. The last play of the game determined the game.
Man.
4 plays Iowa made. This is physical domination in every facet of the game. But the strip sack at the end, where Raiola gave the ball up, we're going to have a different mentality next year because Dana Holgerson has just been signed to a 2-year deal as the offensive coordinator at Nebraska. We're going to have a new defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. And apparently there are 6 black shirts that have already entered the portal or plan to enter the portal. Nebraska has 150 players on the roster. When spring camp or summer camp starts next year, can only be 105. There's going to be a lot of talent available, Terry, to a lot of lesser football teams.
Right.
And
You're really spreading it out.
I'm okay with Nebraska having a younger team. Play disciplined. It's okay
Right.
to be young. You don't have to have all the experience, but play disciplined and play loose. This game should have been a win, should have been 7-5, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Can't exercise the Iowa demon. They have beat Nebraska 9 out of 10 times. But as I reminded somebody who tried to be a mouth breather to me about, Iowa wins. I'm an Iowa fan. Listen, bitch, Iowa might have won, but you've picked the last decade of the worst Nebraska football since before Devaney got there in 62. This 10 years has been the worst 10 years of Nebraska football since 1962. Still have all the conference championships, the bowl games, the national titles, the NFL players, the scholarships, and the sellouts. So go fuck yourself because Iowa ain't got none of that, except the NFL players. So anyway, that's where we're at. Tony White's gone to Florida State. Terrence Knighton, the defensive line coach, to Florida State. And there's a lot of players.
To Florida State.
There's a lot of people assuming that all these Nebraska players are going to go to Florida State. 105 people is all you're allowed to have on the roster.
Yeah.
That's it. So you better make sure. But I think, honestly, having Dana Holgerson, that's my man right there, joining the crowd means that you're going to secure all the offensive players, including Dylan Raiola, including Dante Dowdell, including the receiver that I think so much of, the freshman Barney, Ja'Cory Barney. So you're going to lock that down. Nebraska's two big recruits for defense have already stated that they wish Tony White the best. They're going to Nebraska. And then you saw a couple of people that looked like they're going to lose playing time
Mhm.
enter the transfer portal because those two guys said they're coming to Nebraska.
Right.
So it's going to be a fun. I mean, don't watch Nebraska Twitter. Terry, I wouldn't recommend watching Auburn Twitter real close for the
I
next week
left
or
it a
so.
long time ago. I mean, at one point I was really heavy in Auburn Twitter, and I got tired of it, and started a new one.
But on this topic, just to finish my thought, Tony White's defense 3-3-5 has been a top 20 defense the last 2 years. I don't necessarily think that the 3-3-5 is the reason we stopped Iowa. He put 7 guys in the box and let them play man to man on the backside. Terry, that's not 3-3-5 defense. You and I both know that's not 3-3-5 defense. So if you're going to load the tackle box with 7 guys like this is old school Chicago Bears football, and then you're going to play the backside one to one, man to man, one on one, okay, great. You know, um, so we'll see who the new DC is. Nebraska's got a big checkbook; they can
Right.
hire anybody. And as I said in our group chat, they've got the money; they've just chosen not to use it. But they've also got a volleyball team that's going to play for the national championship or go very deep in the tournament. The basketball team has turned around, and all of this revolves around the football team that, while performing poorly for the last 10 years, is the source of all the revenue that is allowed for the facility updates and the reason for people to come play those sports here. So,
All right.
on to next year and the bowl game, and I'm hoping it's the Duke's Mail Bowl because I'm going to Charlotte if it is. Bank of
Sounds
America
good.
Stadium.
Well, let's look at the Big Ten and what we had coming into the weekend, other
This will
than
be
this game
quick because it
coming
was
up.
all but, yeah.
Well, we had Oregon that clinched their spot, so they had a game with Washington that they won, but that didn't really matter. They could have lost to Washington and still been there. But it came down to 3 teams on the other side. Ohio State, if Ohio State wins, they're in. If Ohio State loses and Penn State wins, Penn State's in. If Ohio State loses, Penn State loses, and Indiana wins, Indiana's in. If they all 3 lose, it goes back to Ohio State. So let's start with Ohio State, and shockingly, Michigan wins this ball game, and this is crushing for Ohio State, not just for this season and not going to the Big Ten championship game. I mean, sure they're going to the playoff, but they can't beat Michigan no matter what. Apparently,
And that highly touted offense did not deliver Saturday against a very bad Michigan team in comparison to what we've seen the last several
right?
years. This is not a good Michigan football team. This is also proof why rivalry week is fun until you go to plant a flag and then you end up with Mace from the Columbus
Right.
State Police or the Ohio State Police. And you got 100 damn people with mace all over their faces because you can't control yourself and you got to act like a bunch of goons. Um, I'll be honest with you, I'm very shocked. I do know, Terry, we both picked Ohio State. The spread was 21 going
Yeah.
into this game. I didn't think it would be that far apart, but I certainly did not expect
I
Michigan to win
thought it
this
would be
football
2
game.
touchdowns. I don't remember what I said last week, but I did not expect this at all.
Mm-mm. No, and Michigan, good for them. They got up, they came to the game. It was the game,
Right.
and they did what only one other team has done, and that was beat Ohio State this year. But to your point, this loss aside, and we're going to get there when we start talking about the playoffs, Ohio State's in.
Oh,
Whether people want to hear it or not, Ohio
just where
State's
do you
in.
put them?
3 top 5 wins or 3 top 5 games this year. 2 of the 3 they won, and they lost the third one by a point to the number 1 team in the country.
Right.
And this is a rivalry game where we've all just said, throw it out the window. It doesn't really matter.
That's right.
So
Let's move on to the next game. Since Ohio State lost, that hands it over to Penn State. If they can win, they will meet Oregon in the Big Ten championship. And not only did they win, they dominated Maryland 44-7. And at the end of the game, threw a touchdown pass. and kind of pissed off Maryland's coach there a little bit.
Yeah, Mike Loxley was upset about it. James Franklin was asked about it in his press conference, and he said, "Well, it's my job to get the second and third string in there and to play everybody that we can play." He said, "What am I supposed to do? Tell them not to play football
Right.
or tell them not to play?" His point was Maryland still had the starting defense in, and he had his third and fourth string. It was cleanup crew in,
Right.
and he's playing offense. I told the same story to my buddy Will earlier today. Tom Osborne wins number 250 against Oklahoma in 1995. If I'm not mistaken, Nebraska won that game 69-0. He was asked by the reporter why he ran the score up. And Tom Osborne's answer was very simple. He said, "Well, I've had my starters out since midway through the second quarter." He said, "I've had the second team out since before the third quarter ended." He said, "And we just happened to bring enough players to play a third and a fourth team, and they've earned the right to play football.
Right.
So I'm going to call the plays, and they're going to run the plays." But in 1995, Terry, backups included people like Scott Frost, Amon Green, Joel Makovica. So guys that were pretty good football players anyway. And Nebraska's offensive line and defense wasn't going to slow down against Oklahoma on Osborne's 250th win. The point was, he just simply stated with a little smile in the corner of his mouth, "Hey, I'm here to run my offense. What I'm going to do." Franklin basically said the same thing. What, I'm supposed to tell these guys not to play just because?
And he said, "I get it. I get it." That's what he started this whole thing was. I get it. I see what he's saying, but I just put my guys in there, and I'm not going to kneel the ball the rest of the game.
And was it him too? Was it Franklin too that mentioned that style points do matter at this point in the season? I
I don't
think
know.
it
I didn't see
was.
that, but
One of
I
the
mean,
coaches said, because somebody asked him about drumming the team, he's like, "Well, style points matter too because I'm supposed to beat these guys, but because it goes, strength of schedule, I need to beat them by more than we're supposed to be." And it was some explanation. I thought it was Franklin that said that. And Mike Bober, I love you. I really hope Big Game James shows up for the champion. We'll see. We'll see if he does, but he certainly showed up against Maryland. And Loxley finishes 4-8. So this one, Terry, Indianapolis, Indiana,
mhm.
at the
Oregon
big
against
stadium there
Penn
in
State.
Lucas Oil. Yeah. And Oregon, first year in the Big Ten, and they are the home field advantage, technically,
And
because
they
they
are the
are
only undefeated team in the country.
in the country. As a newbie to the Big Ten, which everybody says is such a different brand of football.
And I believe I would have to look at it. I know at least 3 of the 4. I don't remember them off the top of my head. They could all be won by newbies.
Yep. Yes, sir.
All right. That was the conferences. Here's the other games that mattered. SMU, as we mentioned, they dominated 38-6 over Cal. South Carolina beats Clemson. Even though Clemson backs into the conference championship game, South Carolina ends it big. And this is a big win for South Carolina when we start talking about who gets in the playoffs.
Not to mention their defense was very good. I watched a lot of that game. Go ahead, Terry.
And then this next game's pretty interesting because Tulane was one of those teams that was looked at as being one of those teams that could sneak in above a Big 12 champion, but Tulane loses 34-24 against Memphis. And Memphis has 10 wins, I believe, 10-2.
Including over Florida State. So
Memphis is pretty impressive, a team we don't talk about much. And here's that Oregon game, 49-21.
Was
over
not
Washington.
close. If you saw any of it, Terry, was not close.
Then Notre Dame beats USC on the road 49-35.
Did you see him throwing punches?
I did. I saw that. And here's the thing. It's like, who's going to punish them? It's got to be the NCAA. They're not in a conference.
Through that. Purdue.
That's one benefit they have. They don't have a conference commissioner to do anything to them.
Purdue's head coach is speculated to be Nebraska's new DC. They're people wanting that. Nobody likes him, though. He was a Colorado football player who says he hates Nebraska. They took a 66-0 loss. Thank God. You know why? Indiana beat Nebraska 56-7 earlier this year. Purdue now has the worst loss, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well,
Mr. Two
Indiana
Games.
didn't get a chance to go to the conference championship game, but they put it out there 66-0 because they're
And
also fighting to
yep.
stay in that 12.
And look at Boise, 34-18 over the Beavers.
That's right.
And Tennessee, Vandy couldn't get it done, Terry. But damn, when was the last time you saw Tennessee Vandy be that close? 13 points.
Well, here's the thing, though. Quarterback's gone. Unless he wins his appeal or whatever, he's suing. Is it a lawsuit? Is that what it was? Or is he appealing or something? He's trying to get another year either way.
And maybe appealing the ruling, yeah.
So, anyway, Tennessee wins 36-23 against Vanderbilt.
I was really hoping they would win because then that means they would have beat both Alabama teams and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Just for fun. I mean, what the hell? I want chaos. But who's in the top 10 this week,
And
Terry?
Oklahoma
do you know?
beat both Alabama teams, too.
Do we know who's in the top 10?
We do know who's in the top 10 because I put this together. Number 10, Boise State, 11-1, undefeated in their conference. Their only loss is a 3-point loss at Oregon. That's just from the only loss perspective, that's pretty impressive. Now, they don't have any great wins here. Oregon State may be their best win of the season. They got Washington State, actually, 45-24. They beat both of the Pac-12 teams.
And Utah State. And San Diego. You know what I mean, though? They just keep rolling.
And UNLV is pretty good.
They will get UNLV in the championship game, so we'll talk about that. But Boise probably deservingly so in the 10. This is what, people hated about the Boise teams during the BCS era. They would win, and they would win a, quote, non-schedule, didn't matter, blah, blah, blah. But then you put them against Oklahoma in 2007, and what happened, Terry? They beat them with a Statue of Liberty play.
Yeah, we don't like talking about that guy over anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Number 9, Tennessee, 10-2, 6-2 in the conference. Their losses are at Arkansas, which pretty painful there, and lost by a couple of touchdowns at Georgia.
But got a little help from Florida, let's be honest, because they had a better season than expected. Got a little help with the win over Vandy. Got a little help with the Alabama win. Beat Oklahoma after Oklahoma goes ahead and beats, like you said, both Auburn and Alabama. Mm-hmm. So Tennessee's resume doesn't look as bad as we may have projected it could be at the beginning of the season. Because we said what games are on here.
Right.
Because we fully expected Florida to be a 3-9 football team.
Right. I was thinking 4-8, but they flipped that around. I mean, what 7-5? Is that what they
7-5, I think, or 8-4. They did a very nice job coming out of it. And I'm sorry, Billy. I thought you'd be fired, and it's not even your fault why I thought you'd be fired. But anyway, number 8, Terry. Who do we have on the list?
Number 8 is SMU at 11-1, undefeated in their conference, and they also have one loss by 3 points to BYU. Which, like we said, a decent BYU team.
Yep. But they took down Florida State, which at this point doesn't matter. Sorry, Dave. But Louisville, Duke is a good football team. Pittsburgh has been in a free fall. We know Boston College is good, but look what they've done to Virginia and California the last 2 weeks.
They beat California pretty bad. California, even though their record doesn't show it, they played some good games against.
Very good. Yeah, very good. I mean, they're the ones that took Miami to the limit, Needed a little help from their friends in stripes. Number 7, Terry.
Number 7, Indiana, hanging in there. Didn't get into the conference championship game. After their loss at Ohio State last week, they came back strong, 66-0. So they were playing to get into the 12.
And I think they have. And we're going to talk about it in a minute. But now, nothing left to say. Great job by Kurt Cignetti. He may be the coach of the year. I don't know that you could take it away from him, honestly.
Number 6, Georgia. Georgia's had some ups and downs, close games. They had the loss at Alabama. They lost at Ole Miss. They still got that home winning streak going. Almost lost it this weekend. Pretty big win against Tennessee. I mean, that was impressive.
And Texas.
At Texas, they put it on them. So, I mean,
Georgia is not Georgia
to start the year.
Yeah, they're not Georgia of Georgia a couple years ago, but they've got a resume. I think that this team is volatile in that you don't necessarily know what version of Georgia you're going to get. I
Right.
also think if Kirby Smart's got a couple weeks to prepare, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to turn back Georgia just because they get a little bit of rest, but they also get game planning, something he learned from the GOAT. The top 5 answers, Terry, of this
Number
week's top 10.
5, Ohio State.
Yep.
They got the loss and they only dipped to 5 here. Their 2 losses are a 1-point loss on the road to undefeated number 1 Oregon, and then this 3-point loss in their rivalry game to Michigan. But along the way, they beat Indiana pretty bad last week, beat Penn State by 7 points, beat Nebraska by 4, whipped Iowa, whipped Michigan State. You know, they're solid.
They're in.
Number 4, Notre Dame. They've got the bad loss week 2 that came out of nowhere, but they didn't have a really tough schedule this year. I guess the toughest game was their first one at Texas A&M, and they won that by 10. But they've rolled. They won at USC this week, 14 points.
And a very chippy physical rivalry game, if you want to call it that. Notre Dame's defense is legit. They gave up 35. That's the most points they've given up all year long. If you run that down that list, Terry, previous to that, 24 to Louisville, which let's face it, Jeff Fromm's offense is very good. But look at the scores: 13, 14, 7, 3, 7, 13, 14, 3, 14, 14.
And that's
Marcus
13 to Georgia Tech, who just put up 563 yards, I believe it was, this weekend against Georgia.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman, Al Golden have a good defense and a solid offense over there at Notre Dame. Whether we like them or not, they're in. But we'll continue that discussion in a minute.
Number 3, Penn State. So they slide right up. Ohio State dropped. Penn State slides up 11-1. Their only loss to Ohio State by a touchdown. Pretty impressive. They got the win. I don't know what game I'm thinking of, but we'll see what Penn State does. If they can win the big game, can they win the conference championship game? But, they're number 3. They're going to be in no matter what, I believe. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think they're in. Even a blowout by Oregon, I don't think hurts Penn State. We'll get there in a second.
Number 2, Texas. Texas slides right up to number 2 with the big win at Texas A&M. Their only loss. They get a chance to avenge that loss.
And they've played, A&M
What
was a good football team. Michigan was a good football team, but not as good as we thought. Oklahoma played decent. They lost to Georgia. Vandy and Florida being better football teams than expected to be help, particularly that Florida. Look at that lopsided Florida win. And we talked about it, so they've got some good stuff on their schedule as well. Bottom line is Texas wins, they're in. If they lose, they're in. So anyway, number 1 with the bullet.
Number 1, no surprise, 12-0, 9-0 in conference, Oregon Ducks, newcomers to the Big Ten, and they are the only undefeated team in the country, and they head to the conference championship game against Penn State.
Quack, 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 Terry. Dan Lanning has this defense rolling. The offense is fast. We'll preview it here in a second. Run it down for us.
Number 10, Boise State. Number 9, Tennessee. Number 8, SMU. Number 7, Indiana. Number 6, Georgia. Number 5, Ohio State. Number 4, Notre Dame. Number 3, Penn State. Number 2, Texas. And as it's been for a while, the Oregon Ducks sit at the top. So what's next? Let's talk playoff seeding.
Playoffs.
We are pretty close on this. Very few differences here. We both have Oregon, Texas, SMU, the top 3. I still got Boise at 4. You got Arizona State sliding in there. I've got Arizona State down at 11, and you've got Boise at 11. But we roll with the same teams 5 through 10. That's Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Tennessee, Indiana. And then here's a big difference at the bottom. 12th seed. I put Alabama, you put South Carolina. I was going back and forth on this. There's a
That
reason.
was the hardest pick for me. Alabama's beat South Carolina by a point, but South
Yeah,
Carolina has rolled. When you look at the
right.
back half of their schedule, the big win over Clemson, they dominated A&M, if you remember correctly, Terry.
Mhm.
South Carolina did, and then they've got one other big win who I can't remember off the top of my head, but really well done by the Gamecocks to get to 9-3. I like their play right now, a lot more consistent, very good defense as opposed to what Alabama has done. Now, all of this can change, but I think 10 of these teams are set. Regardless of championship outcomes, I think 10 of these teams are set. One option, when we get there, UNLV could bump Boise. Because I don't think you get one more than one non-power 5 team.
Right.
Um, Alabama or South Carolina could steal. Iowa State could steal. But I think we truly are down to Oregon's in, Texas is in. I would say SMU would be in, even
So if
losing to
Clemson
Clemson.
wins, okay, that was going to be my
Yep,
question. That's what I've
yep.
seen a lot of people talk about. That's
And
a
I
tough
think
one because
they
I'm
may
not
be the
really sure.
bottom 10, 11, or 12, but I think
Right.
SMU would be in.
I think they
Notre
would
Dame,
definitely drop toward the bottom.
Notre Dame in, Ohio State in, Georgia, 3 lost Georgia to Texas in a close SEC title game. Georgia's in. Tennessee's in. Indiana's in. I mean, I think you basically have 9 or 10 of the contestants for the 12-team playoff on the screen. And I don't think there's going to move. Indiana can't move. Tennessee can't move. Ohio State can't move. Notre Dame can't move. They can move seeding, but
Right.
there's nothing that's going to affect their record, and there's nothing that changes the outcome. At least that's how I see it.
Right. And then we got Miami fans thinking that they're the team that deserves to be in there. Ole Miss fans, and they've got,
Yep.
you know, they've got positive things they can point to, but these are the two teams that I think that I was deciding between Alabama and South Carolina. I picked Alabama at the moment.
Piss
It's,
everybody off when
it's going to be
Alabama gets in and
chaos.
rolls. Yeah.
We think we know who's going to win these. We're going to get like something completely different when it comes down to it this weekend.
Yep. Yep. Let's roll through the championship games, Terry.
All right, so I'm showing them all. We're not picking them all because we don't know what the hell is going to happen with Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State. Let me just throw that out there. So Friday we have the American Conference. That's Tulane and Army. You want to pick that one?
Yeah, I like Army by 7.
Army by 7. So Tulane is favored by 4. I think they're going to bounce back and win by a field goal.
So you think they're going to come back from the win or the loss?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking Army by a touchdown. Western Kentucky got creamed by Alabama. That's what I know about them. Give me the whoever they're playing by the spread.
So I believe TJ Finley is at Western Kentucky. That might be his 9th or 10th team, and I think he's headed to Georgia. I don't know. It's a really weird situation, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. I don't even know what to pick. I'll go Western Kentucky here by a field goal also. UNLV at Boise State. That's also Friday. Boise State's favored by 3.5. This should be a pretty good ball game. What are you thinking here?
Close game the last time, but this is at Boise. They got the home field advantage. It's not a neutral site. This is the blue carpet. Give me Boise, and I'll take them by 7 as well.
This is tough. I want to pick UNLV, but I just don't see it happening. Give me Boise by 10. So now we're going to really get into some of the games. On Saturday, we got Iowa State, Arizona State. Arizona State's favored by 2.5 in the Big 12 championship game. Give me Iowa State for the upset by 4 points.
I'm taking Arizona. They're a hot, hot, hot team. I don't think 2.5 is enough. I understand Iowa State's a really disciplined football team, but Arizona has just got momentum right now. Arizona State, excuse me.
Right.
And I like the way they're flying around, the way they're playing offense in a balanced attack, passing and running. I'm gonna take the Sun Devils, and I'm gonna take them by 10 over the Cyclones.
Well, let's go to the MAC game. And the funny thing that I see here just caught my eye. Ohio State is not in a championship game, but Ohio is.
Yep.
Miami of Florida is not in a championship game, but Miami of Ohio is. And that's what the MAC championship is, Ohio versus Miami of Ohio. Miami favored by 2.5. I got no clue.
Nebraska legend, assistant coach, and head coach Frank Solich was the coach of the Ohio Bobcats after he left Nebraska unjustifiably fired. Give me the Bobcats by a field goal.
I'll go the other direction by a field goal just because I don't have a damn clue what I'm talking about.
Ben Roethlisberger came from Miami of Ohio
That
back in
part I did.
2004.
That's about the only thing I know about.
Yeah.
Sorry, Miami fans. There's probably more Miami of Ohio fans than Miami Hurricane fans. Let me throw that out there. But
They
anyway,
deserve it.
Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship. Texas favored at the moment by 2.5. Give me Georgia by a touchdown.
Well, they are playing in their home away from home, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Terry's favorite. By the way, the Iowa State-Arizona State game is in Jerry's World down there in Dallas. Or not Dallas, technically Arlington. But
Right.
Georgia, they're home away from home. They lost the last one to Alabama last year. And I think Texas is on a vengeance tour. Evan the reporter. I hope he's correct. Per Jacksonville State beat, Rich Rod has been offered a massive 10-year contract. Rodriguez bringing a massive staff with him, including Jimbo Fisher as OC. I don't know that Jimbo Fisher is humble enough to accept an offensive coordinator position from anybody not named Nick Saban. Rich Rod didn't have as much success as Jimbo, so maybe Evan the reporter is correct. I hope so. Neil Brown fired from West Virginia, Terry, after
Right.
6 seasons, 500. Mac Brown fired from North Carolina. And the Purdue coach, Ryan What's-His-Face, who hates Nebraska, fired from Purdue. By the way, Texas Tech, after they won their big game this weekend, they fired their defensive coordinator, and he only let the other team score like 15 points. His defense did. But they fired him anyway. Anywho, moving on to Georgia and Texas, I think Texas flips the script. I think Texas has got great defense. Tony Gibson joined Rodriguez as his DC. I have no idea. So I'm going to Longhorns by a touchdown. And it's not because they're favored. I think that Stark is due. I also think that you're not going to see trash being thrown in the Georgia Dome or the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
All right, let's move on to the next one, the Sun Belt. Marshall and Louisiana, Raging Cajuns. They are favored by 4.5. Another one I'm not going to know much about, but give me Marshall by a touchdown.
I'm going to take the Raging Cajuns because I always liked Louisiana State University. So let's go with the Raging Cajuns there, Terry. I said Louisiana State University. It's
You did.
What is
It's
their
just
name?
Louisiana now.
It's Louisiana. Yeah, the
It's not
Louisiana Raging Cajuns.
hyphenated anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, Louisiana Raging Cajuns. I'm going with Louisiana.
All right, let's move on to the ACC. We got Clemson and SMU. SMU's favored by 2.5. Give me SMU by 10.
We're going to agree on this one. I'm taking SMU by 13. SMU's got a very steady offense, passing game and running game. They're very fundamentally sound on defense. I think Clemson's got some vulnerabilities. SMU will be the home team in Charlotte. To your point, Texas, new arrival. Arizona, new arrival. Mustangs, new arrival. Oregon, new arrival.
Right.
4 for 4 in the Power 5. Give me the Mustangs 13 points.
All right, one more to pick. It is Penn State, Oregon. We don't have Michigan and we don't have Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game this year. Oregon favored by 3.5 to go to 13-0 on the season, heading into get their 1 seed in the in the college football playoff, and I think they're going to do it. I just don't think Penn State's going to win big games enough to do that. So I see Oregon by a touchdown.
I think that Penn State's got a great football team. They're going to be in the playoff. I just would personally, as a fan, love to see Oregon finish the run. No, but everybody said, these Pac-12 teams can't compete in the Big Ten. Dan Lanning brought an SEC mentality to Oregon, and he's brought it into the Big Ten. They run the ball. They run it well. They're as always, Terry, Oregon is a fast, elusive football team. They're well disciplined. They tackle well. I'm taking the Ducks. 3.5 ain't enough. They're going to beat Penn State by 17 points Saturday.
Man, it's a big win against Penn State.
Well, somebody has to be controversial on this show. You are just running the ball, remember?
Hey, I picked the underdog like 3 times here. What are you talking about? Speaking of me running the ball, it worked out for me because bring it to me here. 85-54 on the season for the college pick'em, and it is over. I have won this championship. No reason to list anybody else. But what we will mention is, just like last year, even though this is over and I won it, we're going to open up a bowl pick'em whenever we get a chance to do that, and we ask you to join that just like we did last year. It's all in fun. We ain't paying for anything to give anybody if they win it. Sorry there, Bryant Harimza. You were the champ last year. I'm gunning for you this year.
Yeah, y'all gonna lose to me in the bowl pick'ems because that's my show.
I'm interested to see how they do it with the 12-team playoff now.
Between the 12-team playoff and the transfer portal, it's just a shit show, which is why I love it so much. There's no consistency in it.
Oh, man, we're going to have to figure out how we talk about that next week.
Transfer portal opens December the 9th. Our next show, December the 9th.
Oh, wow. It's going to be last minute throwing stuff in the notes.
Nebraska's already got 6 defenders in the transfer portal, Terry. They think they're going to follow Tony White to Florida State. And, I mean, I don't know. But like I said, head coaching positions open at Purdue, North Carolina, Tar Heels, and West Virginia right now.
All right.
And not Auburn.
What names get thrown up there.
They didn't fire your coach yet.
Well, they got a head coaching position available at Central Florida now also because
oh, yeah, I forgot. Central Florida, yeah.
Gus is headed to Tallahassee.
Supposedly, Gus was on his way out. They were going to fire him anyway.
Oh, he's gotten worse every season.
So he quit and took it away from him.
Hey, you get a chance to be the OC at Florida State versus getting fired, you take that chance.
Well, the problem is our buddy Dave won't think it'll happen for another couple of years unless it's a really awful season. Norvell's seat has to be just a little bit warm there at Florida State.
Right.
Contract be damned.
Oh, this is replace everybody or get out of here. I mean,
13-1 to 2-10. So
but they got
Nebraska went from 5-7 to 6-6. But we got Dana Holgorsen. And
Auburn fired a head coach 2 years after a national championship.
Well, he was an idiot though. Without Gus, he wasn't anybody. With an offensive mind like Dana Holgorsen, I really think Nebraska is going to do some good things. The benefit is, and you know this as a guy who's got an offensive-minded coach, Holgorsen came in with 3 games left, which is really weird. Was promoted to offensive coordinator from analyst or whatever. He's already stated he's going to let the wide receivers coach go. There was 5 drop balls in the Iowa game that 3 of them would have been touchdowns. So you're going to see a very complex offense, I think, from Holgorsen, and I'm very excited for it. We can get good defensive coaches because Phil Snow's the one that keeps coming up because he was rules DC at Baylor and Carolina and all that. They've also got the former DC from Penn State in there who was under Bill O'Brien. But that part doesn't matter so much as long as schematically. If Dylan Raiola cannot execute the offense and they can't score points, it doesn't matter. Here's one thing I want your thought on before we get out of here. I call it a loser's mentality. Matt Rule every week talks to these Nebraska players who are now 2-10 under his guidance of one-score football games they've won. 2-10. Well, it's going to come to the fourth quarter. It's going to be a close game. It's going to be this. It's going to be. If you've got the all-star superpower that they have and compared to some of these other teams, they shouldn't come down to the fourth quarter. How do you change that mentality when it's being instilled by your head coach?
I don't know because I'm seeing it in Auburn too. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's nice to hear, oh, you're playing really close games with everybody, but you keep losing. What's it matter if you keep losing?
Nebraska was the best 3-9 team the country or the world has ever seen, Terry. 3-9, lost a total of 9 games by 47 points.
And what you end up doing is
you went 3-9 and you sat your ass at home.
Well, you hold on to the football and quit turning it over. You do better on third down, and you do better against the other team when you're on defense on third down. And you don't put yourself in those situations in the first place because you don't put it in the hands of a ref in the fourth quarter or anything like that.
No, and I think that's the problem that Nebraska needs to get to is, back in the Osborne days, and I know it's been a while, but even during the Pelini days or the Solich days, when Nebraska got a lead, they'd build on the lead, and they didn't play protect the lead. I think too often they get in this mentality, well, we got a 10-point lead over Iowa, and our defense is just stomping them. But then you make these 4 mistakes on special teams that cost you the football game.
So you either got special teams or even really good defenses are going to give up a big play once in a while, and that ends up beating you if you don't have the mentality to keep putting it on them.
Yep. And in the league, like when you're playing in the Big Ten, you're playing in the SEC at Auburn, 10 points ain't jack shit.
Well, I said it at the beginning of the season. I said there's, before this season, it was Alabama and Georgia at the top, and there was a big gob of teams.
Yep.
That big gob of teams goes all the way to the top of the SEC now. And Georgia and Texas just ended up at the top of it. But you see teams losing to teams that are supposed to be lesser than them. It's a fine line between 8th in the conference and 3rd in the conference.
Well, look at the turnaround of South Carolina this year.
Right.
9-3 with good wins.
Yep.
So, anyway.
All right. Well, it's going to be exciting. We got conference championship weekend coming up. Army-Navy game still a couple of weeks away.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that one next week, I'm sure. It's going to be exciting, and it's going to be talk about the conference championships and talk about the transfer portal, talk about next season, talk about coaches moving around. I might even get to do another map.
Buddy, there's going to be so much movement with, and again, I want everybody to understand where I'm coming from, and it's not trying to beleaguer the point. When you killed the walk-on program, because that's essentially what the NCAA did. They have murdered the walk-on program. They took it out back, put a bullet behind its ear. It's done. I'm from a team, root for a team that built national championship football on a walk-on program.
Right.
Because they sat 3 years and they played 2. Redshirt freshman, learned the other 2 years, you played as a junior and a senior at the University of Nebraska. Unless you were touchdown Tommy. But the point being, they have murdered the walk-on program, and you have 105 players. The landscape of college football, Terry, is about to get awfully, awfully competitive, as if it's not already.
Yeah, it's different every season. It's narrowing down to this more and more. We've got the transfer portal. We've got the limits on the roster being introduced, and we're going to spread out the talent, and they're going to bounce around a lot.
Hell, I forget who it is, but they got one guy who announced 2 transfers in the same week. He was moving. He was going to one team.
Underwood.
He was going to one team and then decided he was going to Kansas or something. All in 1 week. Yeah. I'm like, what the hell, dude? But anyway,
All
let's
right,
wrap it up,
thanks
Terry. It's been a
everybody.
good time.
We've gone over. We're probably going to go over through the bowl season. Sorry about that. We thank everybody that hung in there with us, everybody that votes. And well, here's a question: was that our last poll of the season? I guess it would be.
Well,
We
I
didn't even
mean,
think about that.
well, because after Championship Saturday, they will have
Doesn't really matter.
they'll have the playoff out. So what we think won't matter. Yeah.
Right. So I guess we did the last poll of the season. Thanks everybody that participated. Thanks everybody that has given us feedback and watched both shows that have been with us throughout the season. We got the excitement
Settle
coming.
down.
We got the excitement coming up with the conference championships and the bowl games and all the transfers and the coach movement. So the show's about to start changing, but it's going to be really exciting. It's probably going to go an hour and a half for a while. We thank you for hanging in there. Be a champ this week in everything that you do, everybody. See you next time.